Yes, would you ask Mr. Hughes to come back, please? Thank you. Good. All right, Mr. Hughes?
Yes.
Ready to continue?
Yep.
Yes, Ms. Grange.
Thank you. Yes, I just want to start by correcting something that I said earlier this morning about John Hoban's site visits. So I put it to you that John Hoban's visit in October 2015 was only the third of that year. We've checked the point, and while there are only 2 visits officially recorded in the RBKC system, their electronic system, we think there may have been more based on other material. Now, we've not yet had Mr. Hoban's evidence, and he will be asked about this in more detail. But what I want to do is just ask you whether you had any concerns during your time on site about the frequency of site visits from building control.
During my time, no concerns at all about frequency. It would be what I expected.
Yeah. Now, another topic we discussed this morning was about the taping of joins and joints on the insulation boards. Do you remember?
Yes.
And you said to me that the joins on the insulation boards weren't taped. I asked Taff and Bez this question, and they said that they didn't need to. And that's when I went back and referred to the Celotex, or had a look at the Celotex brochure. And then you carried on. And you said that you could see nothing in the Celotex brochure that it needed to be taped. Now, I just want to look at the Celotex rain screen cladding guide first of all. This is at CEL 6013. Do you recall whether it was this document that you looked at?
That wasn't the document I looked at.
No,
it was
okay.
more of a data sheet.
Well, this is the rain screen cladding specification guide for dated the 27th of August 2014. And if we go to page 14 and look on the right-hand column, if we can blow up the top of that page. Yes, so it's above the heading selection of fasteners on that right-hand column. It says, in all cases, the joints of the insulation board should be taped with a self-adhesive aluminium rain screen foil tape with a minimum width of 75 millimetres. Do you see that there?
Yes, I do.
But you hadn't looked at this guide, so you didn't find anything in the literature you looked at?
No, I didn't see that. I never read that guide. I'm pretty sure it was a product brochure sheet or the product data sheet I read.
Right, yeah. Can I also have a look at the Harley method statement for cladding installation? This is RYD 44095. So this is, we see Harley method statement for Grenfell Tower, and it says activity installing column cladding. Do you see that on that first page?
Yes.
And I want to look at something on page 3. Point 9 at the top, there is a series of numbered points. And it says this: when all the brackets have been installed on the cladding rails, operatives will install the vertical fire breaks in the same position as the internal party walls, marked up, drawing attached, making sure that the joints are butted tightly together and the joints taped with adhesive-backed foil nought tape. Joints against the existing concrete should be sealed with suitable intermescent mastic. Do you see that there?
Yes.
Had you read that Harley method statement when you were considering the point about taping of joints?
I know I read a method statement for Harley's because they had a number of them. This one specifically for the cladding. I don't know whether I read the earlier one, but I certainly read a Harley one and I didn't know that.
Actually, if we look at the next paragraph number 10, I think this is actually clearer about the installation. It says operatives will then fit the 100 millimetre thick insulation around the brackets and fire breaks, taping joints with a class 0 adhesive foil tape where necessary. Do you see that there?
Yes.
So that's very clearly saying it's part of the Harley method statement that Osborne Berry ought to be taping with a class 0 foil tape around the joints.
Well, I would say that they didn't do number 9, but they did do number 10 because they taped the joints between the boards and the fire breaks or the cavity barriers.
Right.
So that was taped.
but you don't think they did number 10?
No, they did. They didn't do number 9, but they did do number 10.
I see. I thought you said to us earlier that you checked and the joins in the insulation boards didn't need to be taped.
I'm talking about joins between boards. The join between the board and the cavity barriers were to be taped. That's what I was told, and everywhere I saw that was done. So I'm only talking about where two insulation boards butt up against each other. They were the joints I was talking about that I checked, but I was told, and everywhere I saw, where a board butted up with a cavity break, that was to be taped, and that everywhere I looked, I saw that.
So you didn't understand from anything in this method statement that the joins of the installation boards themselves should be taped to one another?
I didn't read this, or I'm sure I read a method statement, and there was a number of them, because this is specifically for the cladding on the column panels. I think I must have read one of the earlier ones, but, well, if it says there, then they should have been doing it.
Yeah. Can you explain why you wouldn't have read this method statement if you were supervising this aspect of the works?
I can't, no. Okay.
Just a couple of other points from this morning. You mentioned that the FR in FR 5000 stood, you thought, for flat roof.
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember saying that?
Yes.
Can you recall, how did you learn to come to that view?
I don't remember, but it's something I have a recollection of.
Right. So you don't know who told you that
Specifically,
the FR
I
stood
say,
for that?
I don't know. I'm 100% honest. I don't know if that was from before the fire or after the fire. But I knew that the boards being fitted at Grenfell were RS 5000.
Yeah. Okay, I see. Now, I think a couple of times this morning you said that when you started on the project, you looked at any relevant NHBC guidance. Do you remember that?
No, I didn't say I looked at it. I said that would be the document I would go to if I had any queries.
I see.
I wouldn't go to building regulations. That's too high level for me.
Yeah.
So I would deal with the NHBC guidance.
Yeah. Do you have a recollection of ever looking at any NHBC guidance on this project?
No, I don't. Not specifically on this project, but it would surprise me if I hadn't, because certain things, that's where I would look.
Yeah. Let me just show you a piece of NHBC guidance and see if that triggers any recollection. So if we can go, it's NHB 401317. So this is an NHBC, it's a workbook on cladding systems from 2015. Do you ever have a recollection of looking at that? No. Can we just look at page 24 of this workbook? And I want to look at the second paragraph down on that page. It says there, in buildings of over 18 metres in height, insulation and filler materials in walls is required to be of limited combustibility for the entire envelope. Now, pausing there, I think you confirmed this morning that wasn't something you were aware of at the time of working on the project. And then it says, Kingspan Cooltherm K15 rigid insulation is currently the subject of debate and further investigation after its suitability for use in certain construction types of buildings over 18 metres has been called into question. I wanted to ask you about that. Were you ever aware that the use of Kingspan K15 in buildings over 18 metres had been called into question?
Not aware at all.
Or the subject of debate?
No.
No. And then before I pick up on where I was at this morning, we want to take you to a photograph of the tower, which I believe was October 2015. If we can go RYD 55130. And this is, we believe, either the east or the west facade. We know it's either the east or west because that only has 2 columns down the middle. Do you remember? And the north or south has 3. So we can't be clear which of the 2 it is, east or west. But we've zoomed in, and with the help of the operator, I think we can zoom in to some of the branding on the insulation. I don't know whether you can see that. It's not terribly clear, but we think that that's some Kingspan K15 that you can see in the middle of this page. Do you see that?
Yes.
It has a blue logo going diagonally across the page. Do you see that?
Yes.
Now, but just to be clear, it's your evidence, is it, that you weren't aware of any K15 being used on the building prior to you approving it in late December 15, early 2016, is that right?
I confirm that, yes.
Yeah, okay.
Sorry, when were these photos taken?
We believe October 2015.
Because I believe I took that photo. I say, when I first week I was there, I took a photo of each elevation. So.
Yeah,
And that would be basically what the state the building was in
yeah,
when I went to site.
yeah, okay. Thank you. So just picking up where I left off, I was about to turn to look a little bit more at your relationship with John Rowan and Partners, the Clerk of Works on the project. And I want to go to some minutes of a progress meeting in September 2015, so just before you joined site. This is at ART 406666, 4 sixes. So we can see there, this is Progress Meeting 15, held on the 18th of September 2015. And if we go to item 7.4 on page 7, if we can zoom in, it says there, quality control. Rydon is not responding to the COWs, that's Clerk of Works, observations and comments, re-quality, etc. Issues are not being resolved and responses are not being provided. Rydon to remedy as part of the design meeting process covered off earlier in the meeting. Do you see that there?
Yes.
Now, when you were preparing to join the project, did you read any of these progress minutes?
No. I had 1 day preparation.
Yeah. But you didn't read them, say, in the couple of weeks afterwards when you were first there?
I do, when I get on site, I do read as much as I can do to try and get a bit of a history on it, but I don't specifically read in old site meeting minutes.
Yeah. But were you made aware by anybody else of concerns expressed by the Clerk of Works that their observations were not being listened to by Rydon?
Yes, the clerks made it aware to me, and I believe in a meeting, and that was part of that reason for that meeting in January that we discussed earlier,
Yeah.
going back through the old reports and getting all the outstanding issues into one list and resolving them.
Right. And can you tell us any more about the nature of their concerns about quality? Were you given any details?
I would say it's because the same things were appearing on reports on a number of times, which
Yeah.
would say that they're not being resolved. I'd like to think that if something appears on a report once, but I'll try and sort it out and make sure it doesn't happen again.
Yeah. And can you recall what kinds of things they were raising about the cladding?
Cladding, no, but it would be, if they were outstanding, it would have been what was discussed in that meeting in January.
Yeah, I understand. Can we turn on to some more minutes of a progress meeting held on the 17th of November 2015? This is ART 405184. And this time we can see that you are present, David Hughes, 5 lines down there. And then if we can go to page 3 of the minutes and look at item 2.13. So it says there, this matter is ongoing and that Rydon is not formally responding to the queries, direction and observations provided by John and Tony. SB confirmed that Rydon had no comments on the issues being raised in the Clerk of Works reports, but the issue remains that the Clerk of Works are expecting a response to allow matters to be concluded satisfactorily. Rydon did not provide a commitment to respond and suggested that issues that need addressing could be raised in an email to SB, Steve Blake. NR, I think that's Neil Reed, stated that this was not satisfactory and responses to the Clerk of Works reports are key to ensure outcome certainty is managed, re all things compliance and quality. TB, Tony Batty, noted that items will be reviewed at ultimate inspection and handover, and if not resolved, the certificate of practical completion will not be issued. NR, Neil Reed, supported the statement. Do you see that there?
Yes.
So looking at that, can you explain why it was that Rydon was failing to respond to the issues raised in the Clerk of Works reports?
I don't want to comment on what happened before, but what I do know afterwards is that I started to respond to their reports, and and we tried to close out the snags or any defects or any issues they had as quick as possible.
We can see 3 lines up from the bottom that the concern seems to be about outcome certainty as managed, all things compliance and quality.
Mm-hmm.
Were you aware that they were concerned about the compliance of the works?
Well, that's their job, is to ensure that to me, it complies with the plans and specification. That's what I would say they're assessing their works on. So, yes, and also note the last statement where it says that if it wasn't resolved, we wouldn't have got PC. So my job and what I did over the next 9 months was to ensure that the Clerk of Works, all the issues they had were resolved.
Yeah. Now, can we look at an inspection report that John White produces in December 2015? This is at RYD 3063728. So, with regard to, on page 1, resources, so this is dated the 10th of December 2015, and I just then want to look at, there's a whole section headed resources, and then I want to look in the comments box there. So it says this, I think it should be one of the site managers, Jason, who is the longest site manager, is away for approximately 4 weeks. Also, Jack, the trainee foreman, is not in, and Chris is also not in. Rydons need to get additional supervision, otherwise site safety could be compromised. Also, the contract manager, Steve Blake, has not been on site all week. Do you see that there?
Yes.
Now, do you recall receiving this inspection report?
Yes, I would have received it. I was there on site and it would have been sent to me.
And did it concern you that so many site supervisors and site managers were absent at this time?
Not overly, no. I felt we had the site under control.
So you didn't think that these concerns about presence on site were justified?
There was obviously, when I first started, there was Chris, Jason and Gary and Jack, supervisor, and myself. So you could say there was 4 site managers and 1 assistant. We went down to 2 site managers, 1 assistant in time before Christmas. So, no, I wouldn't say that was concerning. If I'd been on site on my own, then yes, I probably would have been concerned. It would have been too much for me. But
Okay.
we knew that Jason was going away. I don't specifically know why Chris wasn't there that day. It might have been just a day off. I don't remember. But I know Jason went away for 4 weeks over Christmas because he had a lot of leave to use up. So we were aware and we could manage Jason. I don't remember why Chris wasn't there.
So that's Jason North,
Jason
is that right?
North, yes.
And Chris?
Holt.
Chris Holt, yeah. How did you plan at this point to ensure that adequate supervision was carried out?
How do you mean? Sorry, I don't understand that question.
Well, did you think that there needed to be any changes in the light of this concern being flagged by the Clerk of Works?
Well, I knew Jason was planned leave, so no. I can't remember whether I picked up his work. He was mainly looking after the bottom 4 floors at the time. Chris was looking after the internals. So it doesn't say anything about. So I would say that it would be me and Gary who were still on site. Gary was looking after the communals. Gary could pick up Chris's work and I'd pick up Jason's work.
Okay.
So I don't think that's the same as if another site manager. So we don't always, when a site manager has a holiday, ensure that somebody else comes in.
Yeah.
So no, I'm not concerned by that at all.
Okay.
But I would say it was the Clerk of Works. It was within his remit to report if he thought it was under-resourced, but I don't agree that it was.
No, okay. Now, on page 2 of this report, we can see that he's given us a score for health and safety. If we look at the top of the page, it's headed performance indicators, and there's a 7 for workmanship, a 7 for quality, but then only a 5 for health and safety. Do you see that there?
Yes.
And we can see from the key below that between 4 and 5 demonstrates inconsistency in achieving or meeting the required quality standards, inconsistencies in performance evident, responsive rather than proactive approach to quality issues evident. Do you see that there?
Yes.
Now, in the light of that, did you take any steps after this to improve your process of inspection and supervision?
Not specifically, but I would hope that John, if he had any concerns, that he would raise them with me on site before he left. That was something I always tried to ensure with the clerk of works, that they didn't leave site without telling me what their concerns were. Part of the process of obviously managing their expectations and managing their view that they weren't being listened to was ensure that he told me what the issues were and that I listened to him and dealt with it. So I don't specifically remember that 5 score. I don't know whether I consider it fair or not. But
Yeah.
I say, I would expect him to tell me specifically what it was. And if it was purely related to the fact that he didn't think we had enough supervision, then I disagree with it.
Okay. So, but you don't recall a separate conversation with him about this?
I had lots of conversations with him. That's one of the main parts of my job, is to talk to people.
Yeah.
So I'm sorry, I don't remember specific conversations like that. No.
And you don't recall a conversation where they were talking about potentially health and safety not being consistently dealt with?
Well, it also talks about 4 things about quality issues, but in a health and safety, no, I don't remember. He might be that he'd seen something, and as I said, I would expect to see it. I didn't always walk around with the clerks,
Yeah.
but by this time, I'd say that I probably had assumed the number 1 role on site, so I would hope that they would come and tell me what their concerns were. Is because sometimes you don't get the report for another 3-4 days, or possibly next week. So if it is a serious issue,
Yeah.
they should tell me there and then. But I don't remember what that one was, and I don't know whether it says anywhere else in there whether there was a specific health and safety issue that he was giving us a 5 for.
Yeah. In your experience, did Rydon ever appoint its own clerk of works to carry out inspections on projects?
Never been my experience for that. No, that's what our site manager role is.
I see. So that's why
Part
you
of
don't...
our role is to manage it.
Yeah. Now, just to pick up a few more questions about information provided to building control, can we just look at paragraph 72 of your witness statement? This is on page 17. And you just say there, I also relied upon the advice received from and approval given by the RBKC building control surveyors, John Hoban and Paul Hunson. Now, I want to ask about the information that was shared with them. When you started on site, did you ever inquire as to what information building control had been provided with about the external cladding system?
About the external cladding system, no.
Did they ever indicate to you at any time during your dealings with them that they didn't have the information that they required in terms of the external cladding?
No.
Now, in paragraph 58.4 of your statement, this is on page 12, you refer... So this is in the context of the alterations to the community room layout to accommodate the AOV. And in the last few lines, you say, I definitely sent a drawing to the architect for his approval and showed this alteration to John Hoban, RBKC building control surveyor, during one of his visits. Do you see that?
Yes, I do.
Now, when building control were on site, did you regularly show them drawings during their site visits?
No.
Did you ever give building control drawings to take away with them?
Not to my recollection, no.
So it would follow from that, would it, that there was no record of what information or drawings had been provided to building control by you and Rydon?
Any drawing that I provided would probably be done by email, so the record would be on email. But I would say that the record is what they were given to when the application was put in. So.
At any stage during any of their site visits, were any concerns raised with you about compliance with the building regulations?
Well, I would say that any snag or any issue he raised, specifically, like I say, towards the end, was always about compliance with building regulations. It was ensuring, I say, that's what my understanding is that's their role, is to come and basically say, yes, you've built in compliance with it, or compliance with the drawings that they were given.
Yeah. I want to look in a little bit more detail at the visit that building control did on the 7th of January 2016, and because we've got some minutes of this. Now, you refer to this meeting at paragraph 61.4 of your statement on page 13. You just have a look at that. And you say there, Steve Blake and I had a meeting on site with the two senior building control surveyors, John Hoban and Paul Hanson, on the 7th of January 2016. Also in attendance was Neil Crawford, the architect from Studio E. The purpose of the meeting was to discuss what would be required to achieve building control completion prior to handover to the client. And then you say we initially met in the site office for the first part of the meeting, and then we walked relevant parts of the building. I took minutes of this meeting and you exhibit them, and distributed them to all attendees and requested a response from John Hoban and Paul Hanson if they had any comments. Do you see that there?
Yes.
And then you go on and say you distributed those minutes to the client team. And you mention in the last few lines of that paragraph of your statement that there's a typographical mistake in the minutes about the existing riser cupboards, and you've explained what that mistake is. Now, can we just look at these minutes? This is at RBK 403856. So these are minutes of the meeting that was held there with John Hoban, Paul Hanson, Neil Crawford. Now, you can take it from me, we've looked through these minutes and they contain no information about the external facade. Is that because you didn't discuss the external facade with RBKC Building Control at this meeting?
I don't remember discussing it in detail, but I say it was a lot to do with concerns and making sure of everything else. So if they had no concerns on it, then it probably wouldn't have been noted in the minutes.
Yeah.
I honestly don't remember if we did discuss it in that meeting.
Okay. Yeah. Well, we can't see anything from
No.
these minutes. Now, as we just saw, you said in your witness statement that you distributed the minutes and requested comments. But what you don't do is mention whether or not you received a response to those comments. And I just want to look at the comments you did get.
Okay.
So if we can turn to RYD 30633791. This is an email to you. If we could look at the top of the page. To you from... Sorry, this is from you to John Hoban, and you say, on the 12th of January 2016, "Hi John, following your visit to site and our discussion, your only comment on the minutes was that there was no mention of fire stopping to penetrations through walls and floors. Please could you confirm this is correct?" Do you see that there?
Yes.
So is it right that there was a discussion about fire stopping to penetrations through walls and floors, but that hadn't been put in the minutes?
Yes. Well, it must have been because that's what you wrote. I believe, obviously, that was around the time that John came back to site, so I'd have verbally asked him if he had any issues with those meeting minutes I distributed the week before, and
Yeah.
he must have said that, yes, the only thing was there was no mention. So
Yeah.
that's why I was confirming that, apart from that, he was happy with the minutes.
Yeah. Because just looking at your statement at paragraph 61.5 on page 14, you say there, "I had arranged for John Hoban to visit the site on the 12th of January 2016 to go up the mass climbers again." And then you said, "I followed up the meeting with an email confirming a conversation about fire stopping to penetrations through walls and floors." And we just wanted to be absolutely clear when that conversation was had. Do you mean that the conversation was had during the meeting on the 7th of January, or that it was had on the 12th of January?
The conversation about fire stopping penetrations were obviously talked about on the meeting on the week before, so
Yeah.
on the 7th, and I hadn't made a note on the minutes, because as I say, it was a walk-around meeting, so I was walking around trying to make notes in my book as we went round. There was a number of sort of people talking. I tried my best to get an accurate sort of recollection of those minutes down, and as I wrote them down, I think I'm pretty certain I wrote the minutes the next day to make sure that it was fresh in my memory.
Yeah.
But I must have missed that bit, and
Yeah.
that was his recollection. So
Yeah.
his comment back was, "You've made no note of it." So
Yeah.
I was confirming back. So the actual conversation about fire stopping and penetrations would have been had on the walk round.
Yeah.
That should have been noted in the minutes, and it wasn't. But I was asking him to confirm verbally on his visit the next week, and that's what he said. So
I
I
follow.
confirmed it back to him.
Yeah, thank you. Can we look at something Mr. Hansen said as well in his reply to the minutes? This is at RBK 403863. So this is his response, at the top of the page, if we can zoom in on that. And he says to you, "Dear Dave, I've reviewed the minutes and confirmed they are accurate regarding my reference means of escape." And then he says, in addition, John Hoban did also mention about fire stopping, particularly above door frames. Do you see that there?
Yes, I do, yes.
Now, can you recall now for us what was the discussion that was had about fire stopping?
It was, if I remember correctly, it was about fire stopping to the front doors above the new flats that we were building.
Right.
So we built 9 new flats
Yeah.
in there. Well, at that time there was only 8 of them because we didn't build number 6 until later. But it was regarding that.
Yeah. Yes.
Because, as I
do
say,
you-
just to give you a hint, we did a thorough walk round of that building with them at the time to make sure that we'd gone over everything that we might need or was outstanding.
Yeah.
And that was supposed to be an accurate record of that meeting. I obviously missed the part of that thing, but I say it was me trying to take notes as a walk around involved in the meeting as well.
Yeah. Now, can you recall whether there was any issues raised about fire stopping to the windows?
No, I can't recall. And I say, if there was, I'd have hoped I'd written it down. Obviously
Yeah.
missed a bit about fire stopping penetration, but I would hope that if we had the thing, that they would also have noted in, I'd say,
Yeah.
my conversation with John or from Paul that we had. So I can only say that no, there wasn't.
No. I mean, we can see here Mr. Hansen saying particularly above door frames, which is what
Yeah.
you've confirmed. But the reason I'm putting that to you is because this has been suggested by Mr. Hoban. I want to look at his witness statement. This is at RBK 30500416. And I want to start by looking right at the bottom of page 9. So Mr. Hoban is asked the question, did you ever raise concerns about the compliance of the windows at any stage during the project? Do you see that? And then if you go over, we get the response, possibly. During site visits, I would make physical noted in my A3 notebook and raise any concerns with the site manager or person escorting me. I've been informed RBKC cannot locate my notebook. And then he says this, additionally, email from David Hughes on the 12th of January 2016 at 16:20 states that raised the issue of fire stopping during a site visit. This could relate to the windows, but without sight of my notes, I cannot be sure. So you can see Mr. Hoban has suggested it might have been the windows, but he can't be sure. And we just wanted to get your recollection of whether that issue about fire stopping had anything to do with windows.
My recollection of fire stopping is, as I said, it was to do with the front doors to the new flats.
Yeah.
I don't believe it was anything to do with the windows.
Yeah. Did you ever amend your minutes in the light of the comments that you got about fire stopping and penetrations?
No, because I had the only note I got was from my building control, but that was the only error on them. So that was, the email was a note that there was an error. So no, I did not.
Why would you not amend the minutes once you got those comments back?
I'd like to think, I'd like to say I did, but I didn't. I didn't have time. I don't know.
What we can see is that just over 4 months later, you shared these meeting minutes with Claire Williams and Janice Ray of the TMO. If we can look at that, this is TMO 100455169. It's an email dated the 25th of May 2016. And if we zoom in on that top email, you say there in the first line, following our FRA meeting yesterday, please see confirmation email below from Paul Hansen regarding acceptance of minutes from design team meeting held back in January. Do you see that there?
Yes.
And we've checked, and the minutes that you attached to this email were unamended. So they hadn't got anything in about fire stopping being raised by building control. on what basis did you take Paul Hanson's response that you've set out below as acceptance of the minutes? Wasn't he actually raising a point that had been missed in the minutes?
Yes, regarding that point, I'd missed thing, but I would say that I was specifically replying about an issue about fire alarms at this point, or heat detectors on the first floor.
I see. So that's why you're saying he accepted
so
that
the
bit of
penetrations and
minutes.
fire stopping has no relevance to what I was sending it to in this point.
I see. Just the last point on this, if we can look at some Artelia meeting minutes from Progress Meeting 19. This is on ART 405321 at page 5. Sorry, we ought to go back to the front of this document just to orientate ourselves. So these are meeting minutes, Progress Meeting 19, 26th of January 2016. And we can see that you're present. And then on page 5, at the bottom of the page, it's point 3.10.1. It says DH, so that's you, yes, David Hughes.
Yes.
Confirmed that the approved building control inspector had confirmed in writings details found within building control meeting minutes issued on the 8th of January 2016. Do you see that there?
Yes.
But again, it wasn't entirely correct that he'd confirmed the meeting minutes because they had actually raised an issue that hadn't been covered in them, hadn't they?
I agree with what you're saying. Yes, they weren't 100% correct, but I also had a record of what the issue was. So it was that one thing about fire stopping and no mention of it.
Yeah. And then if we look at...
So I would say from that the rest of the minutes are correct. But yes, I do agree with your statement. They aren't 100% accurate.
Yeah. Then if we look at point 3.10.2, it says this: SB Steve Blake noted that the inspector had identified areas of existing fire compartmentation which needed addressing. It was discussed and agreed that although these works are not required under the current contract, it may be beneficial to the TMA to carry out these works to improve the condition of the building. And then Steve Blake to draw up a proposal identifying scope, cost and programme implications of undertaking this additional work to be issued to Claire Williams and Artelia, and then Claire Williams will then review the necessity of these works. Can you help us as to what that was referring to, existing fire compartmentation issues?
It was referring to the existing riser cupboards either side of a lift, the ones where I talked about in the meeting minutes, made my mistake about the chipboard. If you took those chipboard off there, that's where the old riser pipes used to rise for sort of like the original heating system and water distribution system and electric system as well. Is over the years people had come and added, I think, telecom and telephone bits down it. So not all of them were fire stopped between floors. There was some fire stopping missing. So as part of our process at the end is we went round and fire stopped those holes. The only hole that we didn't fire stop was an impossible to do so was on the left hand side of the lifts. As you looked at the lifts, the cupboard on the left hand side, one of the first parts of that was the main electrical buzz bar for the building, which rose through all 24 stories of the building. I say, the only way to fire stop that would have been to turn the whole building off.
Right, yeah.
But other than that, it was mainly, from what I remember, it was mainly the right hand side. You could take the chipboard off and you could see holes which hadn't been fireproofed.
Yeah, thank you. That's really helpful. So I now want to ask you some questions about Exova and fire engineering in terms of the project. Now, is it right that you were the fire coordinator on the project when you were?
Yes.
Yeah. We can see that from Rydon's project fire plan for Grenfell Tower, dated May 2016. If we look at that, this is CST 6033 on the first page. So this is the construction project fire plan, and you're down there as the fire coordinator, yes? Did you receive any training for the purposes of carrying out that role?
I have been on a fire safety training course, yes, but specifically it's about managing fire risk during the construction phase.
Yeah. So you're not looking at fire safety beyond that?
No, as I said before, I have never read the building regulations, and it was never part of the training course I went on. It's about making sure, essentially, that there is enough fire extinguishers on site, they're the right ones for the work you're doing, that people know where they are, there is a plan in place, and everyone at the induction stage is aware of the site fire procedures.
You say at paragraph 107 of your witness statement, if we can look at that on page 24, that you say there that as part of your duties, you took on responsibility for reviewing the project fire risk assessment. Do you see that there?
Yes.
And you say the first review I carried out was in February 2016, and then on a monthly basis after that.
Yes.
And you describe the project fire risk assessment immediately above that at paragraph 106, and you say it's part of Rydon Group's environment and quality procedures. Do you see that there?
Yes.
And you say in the third sentence there, its main focus is how to carry out the contracted works within the site, residential properties, communal and public spaces, and comply with the current regulations. Do you see that there?
Yes.
And we know, just to pull up this project fire risk assessment, it can be found at RYD 3077583. There it is. It's dated February 2016, and it names you on page 2 as the responsible person for the project. You can just look at that. Yeah, so we see that there. Now, paragraph 69 of your witness statement, if we could go look at page 16 of your statement. You say this, you say, I read the Exova outline fire safety strategy report dated 7th November 2013 when it was sent to me by Matt Smith from Max Fordham. It was sent to me to help answer a query about the difference in the numbers of smoke heat alarms between the flats on the first floor and on the third floor. And then you say you liaise with Matt Smith regarding the specification of the M&E systems. When you started work on the project, were you told what Exova's role was?
No.
What did you know about Exova's involvement in the project?
At that time, I didn't think they are. My understanding the whole time I was at the project, that the Exova document, this fire strategy, was a tender document, and my understanding was it had been superseded by the fire strategy drawings from the architect. So when I've done jobs right from the start, we have lots of documents at the start of projects, which to me are tender documents, and from those documents, that's what you build up and sort of build your design from. So my understanding was that the fire strategy drawings overruled that, and it was just a tender document.
Yeah. Did you know that Exova hadn't been instructed directly by Rydon?
I knew that they were essentially had been instructed by Studio E, but it was only from reading that report. Before that, I don't think prior to that report, Exova had come up in any conversations, I don't believe.
So was that your understanding that they'd entered into a contract with Studio E?
Well, my understanding, as I said, it was a tender document that the architects needed to formulate their fire strategy drawings.
And did you ever think about who their client was, Exova's client?
No, not really. I thought it was the architects.
Now, let's just turn up that outline fire safety strategy dated 7th of November 2013, which you say there that you read. It's at EXO 401107. We can see there it's issue number 3, 7th of November 2013. So you must have been sent this no earlier than October 15 when you came onto the project. Were you concerned when you were sent it that this fire strategy had not been updated between November 13 and the time when you were involved in the project?
Not at all. As I said, I thought it was a tender document, and that 2013 was just before the tender period.
I see. So you weren't concerned that this tender document was now quite out of date, potentially?
No, not at all. As I said, I thought it was superseded So I worked to plans and specification that the fire strategy plans were what I was working to, and they were the most relevant documents.
Did you read the whole report?
I believe I did, yes.
Can we look at page 9? This is section 3.1.4. This is compliance with B4 external fire spread, and we can see it says there, it is considered that the proposed changes will have no adverse effect on the building in relation to external fire spread, but this will be confirmed by an analysis in a future issue of this report. Do you remember reading that at the time?
Yes, I do remember reading it.
And did you notice that there was a promised analysis in a future issue of the report?
I do remember reading it. As I said, I didn't think it was an issue because it was done prior to drawings. It was at tender stage, so the Harley's drawings would supersede that. So I don't remember whether it gave me any comfort or not. I just remember reading it, but not really paying much attention to it because I wasn't looking at the document in that respect. I was looking for other information from it.
Did you ever ask anybody whether that analysis had ever been carried out?
No.
Were you at all concerned that this strategy hadn't fully addressed the external cladding?
No.
Can you explain why that was a concern?
Because the architects and Harleys had done the design, so I'd expect them to know and make sure the design was compliant with building regulations. So,
did you think to yourself when you read this about what the proposed changes were that would have no adverse effect?
no.
No. And did you notice, can we go to page 4 of the document, that the description that's provided there, so this is a description that's given right in the introduction of the refurbishment of what it comprises. Did you notice when you read it that it didn't include the overcladding works?
No.
Did you ever contact anyone in Exover to discuss the cladding works?
No.
Can we just look at a couple of emails on this topic? So these are some emails from November 2015. Can we look at TMO 100444122? So these are emails between Matt Smith and Andy Bridges, but they copy you in. Do you see that?
Yes.
And I just want to start with the email at the bottom of the first page sent by Matt Smith. And he says to Andy Bridges, copying you in, "Afternoon, Andy. I'm not confident the fire strategy document that I have is the most up-to-date. You'd be best advised getting a copy from Rydon." Do you see that there?
Yes.
And then if we look at the top of the page to the response, the response is, "Good to meet you today. I'll get the lighting tech subs over in the next day or so. With regard to the fire strategy document, Dave has already sent it over. FYI, the reference is issue number 3, dated 7th of November 2013. Do you see that?
Yes.
Did you check when you received these emails whether the document you had was the most up-to-date?
No, but it was the only one we had.
So it didn't concern you that 2 years after the 3rd issue of this outline fire safety strategy, there had been no update?
No, as I said, my understanding was, and I understand I had it all the way through the project, that it was a tender document. It was there to sort of help architects with designing their fire strategy drawings. And nobody ever said to me that it needs to be updated.
Can we look at another set of emails? This is in April 2016. If we go TMO 100131128, and at the foot of page 2, I want to start with that, is an email from Claire Williams to you, dated the 27th of April 2016 at 12:43. Do you see that there?
Yes.
And she starts off, "Dave, we're putting together protocols for what happens in the case of the detection system being activated. So I need a couple of answers to the below." Do you see that there? And then item 1, she says this: can I please have a copy of the latest fire strategy document? I have an original version but want to make sure it has not changed. Drawings would be useful. And then I think what you've done, is in blue, you've answered her comments.
Yes, I have, yeah.
We know that because you say that in some emails further up. And you've said, Exova fire strategy attached, not updated from tender as far as I'm aware, and fire strategy drawings attached to be updated to as-built. Do you see that there?
Yep.
Now, you say there, Exova fire strategy attached, not updated from tender as far as I'm aware. So you don't seem certain at the time of responding to this email whether it had been updated or not. Did you ever check with anyone else at Rydon to establish whether it had been updated?
No, but I don't know who I would... Well, the only person who would check was Steve, but no, I never did.
Did it occur to you to take any steps to discuss, say with Steve Blake, the commission of an updated fire safety strategy from Exova or another fire consultant?
No, I go back to my understanding. My understanding was that it was a tender document and the fire strategy drawings superseded that, the strategy. So nobody asked me ever to get it updated. Otherwise, if I had, I would have.
And I mean, you can see from this that it doesn't look like the TMO themselves have requested an update,
No.
does it?
No, nobody did.
Did you ever discuss the points you're responding to here in blue with Mr. Ashton?
I think you have a record of my only correspondence with Mr. Ashton, which was to do with smoke alarm in the hub room.
Yeah.
I believe that is the only correspondence I had with him.
I think you say in your statement that you had dealings with him by phone and email.
Yep.
So did you ever discuss on the telephone with him that the fire strategy document wasn't
No, I
complete?
didn't. But it goes back to he wrote and as far as I'm concerned, he was answering questions regarding the tender document. It was his report. He was answering questions regarding that.
If we can look at Ms. Williams' response to your email, if we could look at that, RYD 3075983, she says this, Dave, this still has the old TMO office. I think the fire strategy stuff may have been superseded on this basis. Do you see that there?
Yes.
So I think it follows from your answers, but at this point, when she says it's been superseded, you didn't consider discussing with anyone the request of an updated document from Exova. Can we look at some Clerk of Works review meeting minutes? This is ART 406688. Now, this is back, we looked at this document before, I think, 12th of January 2016, and there's, on page 5, 3 lines from the bottom, it says this. We looked before at what it said about fireproofing, but I want to ask you now about this comment. It says fire strategy needs to be updated as per on-site discussions, and then your initials are there on the right-hand side in the column. Do you see that there?
Yes, I do.
Now, what fire strategy is being referred to there? Do you know?
I say, my understanding was it was the fire strategy drawings, and I'm pretty certain after this meeting that the architect updated the drawings and I sent them over.
I see. So this wasn't a reference to issue 3 of Exova's fire safety strategy for the building?
If it was, it's not how I took it. So I took it to be the fire strategy drawings, and I'm pretty certain that they were updated and sort of, a week or so later.
Yeah.
Because this was very soon, in and around the time that we had the meeting with the building control and the architect on site. And I say, this fire strategy got discussed at that meeting as well. So, and the architect updated these drawings. So my understanding, and I'm pretty certain that's how it got closed out, this, was that the fire strategy drawings were updated.
Yeah. Can we just look at paragraph 70 of your statement at page 16? You say there, during the period of my involvement, there were a couple of times that Terry Ashton of Exova was consulted regarding specific advice on fire safety. Generally, it was to do with queries raised in relation to the original fire safety strategy report. I personally corresponded with him about internal fire safety matters by email and phone, My understanding was that he would answer any queries relating to the original fire safety strategy report. Do you see that there?
Yes.
On what basis did you understand Mr. Ashton would be answering any queries relating to the original fire safety strategy report?
Well, I kind of got it from, I think it was Matt Smith, who said if you have any, because I think I phoned Matt about the things, and he said, you got any queries that report, or asked Terry Ashton. And I don't remember whether the architect told me that as well.
Right.
But I think it might have been, in fairness, from that earlier email you saw where Matt Smith and Andy Bridges from RJE were talking about it, and he said any queries go back to Terry about it.
Yeah.
So that's what I did.
At any time when you were going back and forth to Mr. Ashton, did you ever ask him whether Exova had considered the cladding or otherwise analysed the impact of the refurbishment on the external spread of flame?
No, I did not.
In your experience, based on, you've obviously worked for Rydon for a long time,
Yes.
did Rydon normally engage a fire engineer when carrying out major construction or refurbishment works?
My experience, I'd say, I have no experience of them doing it, but that doesn't say that on the larger buildings I've done, there hasn't been a fire strategy document. But, say, I have no recollection of ever seeing one on a Rydon site. But I don't know whether he's specifically talking about, sort of the high-rise buildings or the other new buildings I've done for Rydons.
Yeah. And now I want to ask you just a few questions about Mr. Carl Stokes,
Okay.
the fire risk assessor. If we look at paragraph 71, it's on this page. We don't need to go anywhere else. It's here. You say, I liaised with Carl Stokes, fire risk assessor for KCTMO, mainly answering his queries following his fire risk assessment inspections. Do you see that there?
Yes, I do.
What was your understanding of Carl Stokes' role relating to the refurbishment?
My understanding was he had no role in the refurbishment. He was the client, so KCTMO's fire risk assessor.
Yeah. Now, at paragraph 102 of your statement, can we have a look at that? So there you tell us that you walked around the tower with Carl Stokes on the 4th of February 2016, and you say the main purpose of this meeting was to look at areas impacted by the planned opening of the entrance atrium and the alteration to residents' access route into the tower. Do you see that there?
Yes.
But was that visit also to carry out a pre-assessment of the building works prior to handover?
It was kind of that effect. The reason we called Carl down, and I think it was done through Claire, was we wanted to open the entrance lobby, and part of the sort of requisite from the client was to get some kind of completion certificate. We'd asked building control to give us a completion certificate for the area, so they were client with, or KCTMO expected that then it would be safe for the residents to come through the area. Building control, when I asked them, said no, we won't give you a completion certificate until the whole building is done. That is more a fire risk assessment thing. So then we asked the client to send their fire risk assessor down to assess the new entrance route and sort of the new access egress route for the residents. But he would say, yes, it's safe for them to come through.
Yeah.
Because we needed to get them through that entrance lobby to be able to finish off the second floor where the old entrance was, or where the old access bridge was, because the old access was where the last flat was going to go. So until we could get them coming through the new lobby, we couldn't finish off our works.
Right, yeah. Thank you, that's helpful. Can we just look at a couple of emails relevant to this? RYD 3066527. This is an email from Steve Blake to Matt Smith, and you're copied in, 1st of February 2016. Hello, Matt. I've arranged to meet Carl Stokes to carry out a pre-assessment of the building works prior to handover. Do you see that there?
Yes.
Yeah. And did you also understand that this visit was going to enable Mr. Stokes to prepare his record of significant findings and action plan, which he then subsequently prepared in April 2016?
That's just, to me, it's just a grand name for his fire risk assessment. That's what it was.
Yeah. Let's have a look at an email just briefly on this. RYD 3065985. This is Steve Blake, and I think it's Carl Stokes. We can see it says morning, Carl, and you're copied in. And he says, could we meet at Grenfell next Thursday? We are rapidly reaching the conclusion of the project and would appreciate the opportunity to ensure we have covered all formalities in respect of a fire risk assessment. Do you see that there?
Yes.
Now, Mr. Stokes's record of significant findings and action plan is dated the 26th of April 2016. Let's just turn that up. It's at RYD 30944315. And we look at page 2 of this. This is what it looked like. Do you remember seeing this on the project?
Yes.
Yeah. And what was your understanding of the purpose of this document?
It was his fire risk assessment, so it was the client's fire risk assessment. He
Yeah.
was working for KCTMO.
And was it to satisfy the TMO that fire safety issues had been resolved?
Well, yes, that's what the idea of a fire risk assessment,
Yeah.
the purpose of it.
Now, we can see that you asked Mr. Stokes to visit the site again just before this assessment was prepared on the 7th of March 2016. If we can go to paragraph 102 of your statement on page 23. So we see that in the last line. On the 7th of March 2016, I requested that he visit the site again. Do you see that there?
Yes.
And then we can see this in your email to him of the 7th of March, which is at RYD 30700161. And if we could blow the top up, this is an email from you to him. And you say this in the third paragraph there. I'd like to get you back to site this week to update the Grenfell fire risk assessment to satisfy the client. So we open the main entrance lobby for residents. However, I understand that the client needs to agree this, as you'll need to visit again once all systems are fully commissioned. Do you see that there?
Yes.
What did you mean by to satisfy the client there?
But to satisfy the client, the entrance lobby was safe to open. So I think the one on the 4th of February we talked about earlier was like a pre-visit. This is what I'm going to need off you. So then we, obviously in the month after that, done a load of work in terms of that. I say, if I remember correctly, I think we opened the entrance lobby on the 17th of March. So we were very close to being ready, and we were trying to get everyone's approval that it was ready to let residents through.
Yeah. Now, what I want to ask you about now is some comments Mr. Stokes has made about what he was told about the cladding.
Yep, okay.
So I want to look at his witness statement. This is at CST 403063 at page 42. And I want to look at paragraph 120. And he says this, he says, when inspecting the tower in April 2016, I spoke to various people, including representatives from Rydon. However, I cannot now remember exactly who I spoke to on this occasion. As I had noted the isolated test cladding panel when visiting the tower in 2014, and in particular timber battens that were being used at that time, I asked about how the cladding had eventually been fixed to the tower. As can be seen from my handwritten notes, following discussions with representatives of Rydon, I recorded OK, FR no timber, and cladding external non-combustible metal fixings signed off by BC. And then he says, I do not remember the precise conversations I had. However, my understanding on leaving the tower after my inspection was that the actual cladding was compliant with the building regulations, and that the obvious presenting issue, the timber battens, had been dealt with as metal fixings were now being used. And then, in addition, as far as I was concerned, the cladding itself and the system by which it was fixed to the building had been passed by building control. The system and component parts would have been compliant with the requirements of the building regulations and ADB. That is what I meant by reference to new fire-rated cladding in the April and June 2016 FRA's fire risk assessments. Do you see that there?
Yes.
Now, Mr. Stokes says he's referring there to initially to these notes that he made, OK, FR, no timber, and cladding external non-combustible metal fixings signed off by BC. Do you recall any discussions you had with Mr. Stokes during his visits in April 2016 about those topics?
Specifically, no, I don't remember. But if he says we did. But same as him, my understanding was that it had been passed by building control and the system and component parts were compliant with building regulations. So if I confirmed it to him, that was because that was what my understanding was.
Right. Do you have a specific recollection there of discussing the fixings?
No, but he says he says no timber, and I would have definitely confirmed to him that there was no timber in the system and that metal fixings were being used. I don't remember specifically going into fire rating or anything like that. But same as him, my understanding was that that system was compliant.
And he says in the last part of that paragraph that as far as he's concerned, if the cladding itself and the system by which it was fixed to the building had been passed by building control, the system and component parts would have been compliant with the requirements of the building regulations. Did you ever have any discussions with him about whether the cladding had been passed by building control?
Not specifically, but the time he's talking about, I've struck every single mast climb around the building and we had 20 floors of finished cladding there. So I would say that was signed off by building control. But specifically in terms of, actually building control saying, yes, it's compliant, no, I have no recollection of that, saying that to him.
No. And he says that my understanding on leaving the tower after my inspection was that the actual cladding was compliant with the building regulations. Did you ever have that specific discussion with Mr. Stokes?
I don't remember having that specific thing.
Would it have been you that he was having these discussions?
It would have been me if I had, yes, because I was one at that point who mainly dealt with Carl when he came on site.
What about Mr. Stokes asking you what the nature of the cladding materials at Grenfell were?
I don't remember specific conversations. I'm sorry, I don't.
So you can't remember a conversation where you might have referred to fire-rated cladding or
No.
talking about the fire performance of the cladding?
No.
Is that you can't recall having those conversations, or that you actually think you didn't have those conversations with him?
I don't know. As I said to you earlier, I have a lot of conversations with an awful lot of people. That's my job. Or it's a big part of my job. So I'm afraid I don't remember specifics of every single conversation.
Yeah.
But if he said that he took it from that thing, that it would have been with me. I can confirm that.
Yeah. Just one last set of questions on this topic, and then we might pause for a break. So I want to take you to an email thread that you weren't copied into, but I want to see if it triggers any recollection for you. This is at CST 402764. And this is an email thread of the 24th of April 2017. Now, the genesis of this email chain is that the LFB had sent the TMO a letter, just so you understand, dated the 6th of April 2017, about external cladding and glazing following the Shepherd's Court fire.
Okay.
So the TMO had got a letter about that fire, and I want to pick this up at the bottom of page 1. So Janice Ray, we can see, at 9:34, asks Carl Stokes. She says, Carl, my understanding is that we do not have any blocks with external cladding of this nature. Are you able to confirm, please? I need to write back to our Director of Housing, and I think you're probably best placed to advise me on the construction of our blocks. Do you see that?
Yes.
And then if we look at his response to that, we can see that he says on the 24th of April 2017 at 12:20, as far as I know, that is correct. Grenfell was clad, but the cladding complied with the requirements of the building regulations. Lots of questions asked of Rydons and answers received back from them. Do you see that there?
Yes.
Now, do you remember Mr. Stokes contacting you at this time, at any time in 2017 or April 2017, and asking you questions about the cladding?
No, I had no correspondence with Carl.
And would you say that the exchanges you'd had with Mr. Stokes in 2016 resembled lots of questions asked of Rydons and answers received back from them.
Well, there was lots of queries in fire risk assessment, so you could say
Yeah.
that was lots of questions.
Yeah.
But I also would expect that he would have talked to the earlier site team as well. He'd been down to Grenfell prior to my involvement a number of times. I knew that.
So he may have spoken to
He
people
may have
before
asked
you
lots
got
of
to
questions
site.
then as well. So over the duration, he did ask lots of questions. But
Yeah. Mr. Chairman, I think that's a good moment for a break.
Yes, so do I. Thank you. We'll have a short break now, Mr.
Okay.
Hughes. If we say 25 past, will that be all right for you?
That's fine. Yeah.
We'll give us a few minutes then.
Thank you.
So please remember not to talk to anyone else about your evidence or anything to do with the refurbishment. And if you'd like to go with the usher, we'll resume at 25 past.
okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Right, 25 past 3 then. Thank you very much. Would you ask Mr. Hughes to come back in, please? It does too. Right, Mr. Hughes, you ready to carry on?
Yes, I am.
Good, thank you. Yes, Ms. Grange.
Yes, thank you. Just a follow-up question on building control. Can we just look at your witness statement on page 12, at the bottom of the page? If we look at the bottom of the page, 61.1. So we went through this in detail previously. You say there on the 30th of October 2015 was your first contact with building control, when I requested a site visit from John Hoban on 2nd of November 2015, so Steve and I could discuss the project with him.
Yes.
Do you see that there? And then over the page on 61.2, we asked you about you say, I requested that John Hoban visit site to inspect the cladding on the 11th of November 2015. Do you see that there?
Yes.
Now, going back to 61.1, was there a separate visit from John Hoban on the 2nd of November 2015, i.e. before the one on the 11th of November 2015?
Yes, I believe he turned up the day after. I believe he turned up on the 3rd of November.
Right.
He didn't turn up when Steve and I was there,
Right,
but he turned up the next day.
I see. So did you meet him on that day?
Yes.
When you say he didn't turn up when Stephen...
No, so I requested he turn up on the 2nd.
Yeah.
I didn't say I got no record he did thing, but I remember him coming to site the day after.
Yeah. Can we just look at a document? This is RBK 403041. And I want to look at page 4. So there, in the middle of the page, we can see these are some notes we've got from RBKC's system. It says, 2nd of November 2015, cladding inspection and meeting with new project manager. So is what you're saying that didn't happen on the 2nd, but it happened on the 3rd?
Sorry, my recollection's wrong then. He must have turned... I didn't think he met with me and Steve. So he might have not turned up when Steve might have left site at that point. So
Yeah.
then that was one. And yes, he's saying that he met with me. Although, as I say, I was never the project manager.
And can you help us as to what was discussed at that meeting?
No, I'm afraid I can't.
No.
I can't remember. It would have been sort of introduction, have a quick walk round with him and just check he was okay.
And you can't remember whether the cladding system specifically was discussed?
No, specifically no.
Okay. Moving on then, just a few questions about fire doors. Can we go to a document RYD 3078593? And I want to look at an email at the bottom of page 1 and onto page 2. You there send Mike Brown of Rydon. You're attaching the Grenfell Tower Significant Findings and Action Plan April 2016. And you say, Mike, client FRA and Rydon comments as discussed. And then you say this, biggest thing to prove, FD30 to riser cupboards. Do you see that there?
Yes.
Can you help us as to what that meant?
It was the riser cupboards, or I described them earlier, the cupboards on the existing lobby. So from the 4th all the way up to the 24th floor, it was proving that those doors were FD30s. There was no markings on them because I think they'd been painted.
Yeah.
So we were trying to find sort of records from who we got them from, that we had been supplied FD30 doors.
Yeah. If we can then look at your email at the top of page 1 from you to Steve Blake. You say there at point 1, just to read, hi Steve, non-fire rated doors doesn't make sense for following reasons. And then you say, we fitted smoke seals into doors. Now, can you help us as to what doors you're referring to there?
Same doors. So talking about on each of those riser cupboards from
Yeah.
the 4th through to the 23rd, sorry, not 24th, there was 2 doors.
Yeah.
So I'm talking about those doors in the new riser cupboards, the ones that Rydon's built.
And if we keep going in that, after the numbered points, there's a sentence that says, John Hoban stated on last walk around that doors, including cupboards of protected lobbies, must be fire rated. Do you see that there?
Yes.
Now, can you help us? Did Rydon ever carry out any works to the stairway doors, the doors between the stairs and the lobbies, on levels 4 to 23? during
The only
work?
works we did was paint them.
Right, okay. So did you fit any smoke seals to these
No,
doors?
we didn't. That was done by the client's contractors.
When you say-
KCTMO's contractors.
Which contractors were they?
I don't know. It was done prior to my time, but I know there was some records, emails on the system about it because the contractors had left in a right mess and all the residents thought it was to do with us, but it wasn't. Sorry, by us, I mean Rydon's.
I see. So Rydon didn't do any work at all to
No.
any of those stair doors?
No, apart from painting them.
Yeah. Okay. And I want to ask you some questions about the health and safety file. Now, we've looked at the question of fire risk assessment, and can we call up again the record of significant findings and action plan dated the 26th of April 2016? This is at RYD 30/94315 at page 2. And what I want to do now is look at page 3 and look at the first item in the third column. So here, what we see is on unidentified risk or hazard, third column on the left, it says when the construction refurbishment work is completed on this building, all information as required by the building regulations must be handed over to the TMO by the contractors before they hand over the areas now under their control. Do you see that there?
Yes.
And if you look in the next column along on the right, under item 2, it says all the regulation 38 information as required by the building regulations.
Yes.
Do you see that? And it's marked as a high priority in the second red column. Were you aware at the time of the requirements of regulation 38 of the building regulations to provide fire safety information to the responsible person?
No, but I was aware that we had to hand over a health and safety file and OM file to the client at the end of the job.
So you didn't know what your separate duties might be under regulation 38?
No.
If it was anyone's responsibility, was that your responsibility within Rydon to ensure that fire safety information was passed to the client?
No, I wouldn't say it was. I'd say it's a whole team's responsibility to pass it on.
Right.
But I think we talked about we employed a specialist to do the O&Ms for us, provide all the information to him.
Yeah. Within Rydon, were you responsible for overseeing the production of the operation and maintenance O&M manual?
No, but I helped a lot with it. I don't know where, but we contracted a company called All Group Holdings to do the O&M file and health and safety file for him. It was part of his contract to obtain the information and compile it in the way that the client wanted. But my agreement was there's an awful lot of things we had on our files. So like snagging sheets had to go into it. There were certain things he wouldn't get from anyone else apart from Rydon's. So I sent over the documents that we had in our system. And I also said that if you struggle with any contractors, let us know as soon as you can, and we'll sort of give them a little G up as well.
Yeah. I think you began that answer when I asked you were you responsible with a no, but I helped a lot with it.
Yep.
If not your responsibility, who else within Rydon was responsible for making sure?
On a judicial contract, it would be, in my mind, it would be the contracts manager to do that.
I see. So that would be Steve Blake by this time. Now, as you've explained already, we know that All Group Holdings were asked to provide and produce an O&M manual and a health and safety file for Grenfell Tower. What steps did you take to ensure that the file was properly completed?
It took a long time to do it. I think over about 4 months it took to compile the thing and get all the information together. And I know at one point I got one of the drafts and I had a quick look through it. At the time I didn't note any issues with it, but I never saw the finished file. It was handed to Claire Williams by Steve Butler, I think, from All Groups Holding, and I say at the time she had the principal designer title.
I see. How were All Group Holdings going to collate the information that it needed? Did you know?
In line with the, I'm pretty certain they had the contract document. We set out what needed to go in it. We set out we sent them so they could give us a quote. The relevant section of the MVS specification, about to say the ERs, but the MVS specification, the relevant sections that he needed to find out what you need to get off the contractors.
I see. So you expected all group holding to then liaise with the subcontractors
Yes.
to get that information?
I did have a couple of meetings with him along the way, sort of checking on progress. So I certainly was involved in a meeting with him and Claire as well. Because obviously, ultimately, we were trying to satisfy Claire that she had all the information she needed.
And at the end of the process, did you take steps to satisfy yourself that the O&M manual that was presented to the TMO was the complete manual?
I never saw the completed manual. It got handed to Claire, I think, by thumb drive.
Do you know
So-
why you never saw it?
Just never got a copy of it, or it never went on our systems. So
Did you understand that there were requirements in the CDM regulations for the preparation of a health and safety file?
yes, as I said, I am aware that one of our sort of contractual obligations is to supply an O&M file and a health and safety file at the end of a contract.
And did you know what that file had to contain?
Well, anything relevant or as set out in, sorry, I keep still calling them ERs, as set out in the specification.
I see. So you didn't look at a particular document or guidance to help you as to what it
No,
should contain?
I would expect what was in the specification would be what was required.
Now, 2 copies of the health and safety file have been provided to the inquiry, one from Rydon and one from the TMO. The Rydon version has a section 4 health and safety file, but this section contains no information, whereas the TMO version contains an index that we'll look at the moment. Can you help us as to why there might be 2 versions of the health and safety file that are different, one from Rydon?
As I said, I got an earlier draft of it, and that would be the one which was on our systems. So that would be the one that I had a look at. But I believe the O&M files actually got handed to Claire sort of after practical completion, and it was given to her on a thumb drive, but I never got a separate thumb drive so I could copy it onto our system.
Yeah. Can we look at a document? This is MET 3065979. This is an email of the 23rd of May 2016. So this is from Steve Blake to Neil Reed, and you're copied in. And it says we're all working towards a partial possession handover date, 27th of May 16, which is 4 days away. And then you can see towards the bottom, just before the end of the email, the O&M Dropbox link will be provided later today. Do you see that?
Yes.
Is it possible that because partial possession and handover was contemplated, that there was an earlier draft but incomplete version of the O&M manual, and then later a second version after full practical completion? Is that possibly the reason why we see 2 different?
Possibly. I don't know if that's absolutely correct or whether it was just, I say, we started work on it, I believe, back in sort of April time. And, we had a partial copy from Steve Butler.
Yeah. Can we look at a document which is the contents page for the health and safety file? This is TMO 100-13708. So this is the contents page for the health and safety file, which was included in the building manual. Can you remember seeing this before?
As I said, I only looked at the draft version, which would have been probably, as you say, around about March time.
Right.
So no, I didn't look at it in great detail.
No. We can see from an email on the 7th of June 2016 that you were copied into this contents page. Can you see that it includes cross-references to other parts of the building manual? Do you see that there?
Yep.
Did you ever check those cross-references?
No.
Were you aware of guidance supporting the CDM regulations which explains what a health and safety file should and shouldn't include?
Specifically, as to exactly what it should include, no, I'm not aware, but I am aware that it is a contractual obligation to supply it.
If we look there at B1 under architectural design, it says architects as-built drawings, and then it says please refer to the drawings located in the building manual, part 2, section 2.1.2.2. Do you see that?
Yes, I do, yeah.
And then if we can look at TMO M701, this is the contents page for the building manual. And if we go to page 9, which is section 2, what we see is there's no 2.1.2.2. It's not there and it's not over the page. If you look over the page. So that cross-reference appears to be wrong. Did you notice that at the time?
No, I did not.
Did you ever check points like that to check that it all
No, as I remember,
correlated?
looking at it very briefly, but not going over it in great detail.
Now, in its investigations, we've discovered that the Rydon version of the O&M manual was edited on the 14th of June 2017. That's the night of the fire. We can look at the metadata. If we can go to BLARP 2606 at page 208. Yeah, and if we can blow up that top box, this is figure 17.1, and what we can see is that the metadata for the manual has been accessed, and it says created 14th of June 2016. Do you see that there?
Yes.
Were you aware of the O&M manual being accessed or edited that day?
I was in the office on the day of the fire, so I was outside Steve Blake's office, and on the day of the fire, I say it is very blurry that day, but I know I had a meeting with the Health and Safety Department where I was asked to get the relevant documents, and then we transferred them to a new part of our system. So I think Simon O'Connor talked about there's an M drive, but there's also on the Rydon there's a filing system called the R-Way system, which was a newer system, and that's what the majority of the company worked off at the time. So the meeting I had, the Health and Safety team asked me to sort of get the relevant documents, and one of the first ones I got was the O&M file, and I copied it across to the R-Way system. I don't know if that is the reason why it looks like there's a new creation.
Yeah, that helps. Did you do anything with the contents of the file?
No.
No, you just saved it over.
Well, yeah, just copied it over from one part of our system, the old part of our filing system, to the new part of our filing system.
Yeah, that's helpful. So just one last question on this topic. If we can go to ART 405362 at page 4. Sorry, we ought to just 5362. So if we just go to the back of the start of these meeting minutes, these are some meeting minutes, I think, from the 23rd of February 2016, progress meeting 20. And we can see you're present. And if we can go to item 2.20 on page 4, and we can see that there's an action there about fire protection works to start with, nothing further is to be progressed other than the remedial works required of the Clerk of Works in relation to Rydon's own works. And then if we keep going down, Carl Stokes will produce a report in the form of the fire risk assessment, and then at the end, NR requested that this be included in the health and safety file, CDM, on completion as a formal recognition of a fire risk shortfall and potential residual risk arising from the building in its previous form. Do you see that?
Yes.
Do you know whether the health and safety file was ever updated to include this?
No, I don't, but I also think that what Carl Stokes is talking about is what we talked about earlier, which is the holes through the existing riser cupboards, which we fireproofed.
Yeah.
So there was no and we also did something very similar down in the main electrical cupboard as well, fireproofed some existing holes. So where we saw issues with compartmentation, we fixed them.
Yeah. So I now just want to ask you a few brief questions about the smoke control system and the related interface panels. So in your statement, you say that you ran a tour for the local fire brigade on the 26th of July 2016, at which you showed them the operation of the human mechanical interface HMI panel for the smoke extract system and the automatic opening vents in the lobby areas. Now, you discussed this, if we just have a quick look at paragraphs 92 and 93 of your witness statement on pages 21 and 22. So that's where you say that you ran familiarization tours. You talk about the TMO in 91 and then the tour for the fire brigade on the 26th of July 2016 in 92. Now, is this HMI, Human Mechanical Interface Panel, the main control panel for the smoke extract system in the lobby?
Yes, the one in the
Yeah.
lobby, yes.
Can you remember how you demonstrated the operation of that HMI panel and the AOVs for the fire brigade?
No, I don't remember specifically, but I knew it was a fairly simple system, but I obviously I got to learn how it worked with JSW and PSB, so it was quite a simple one. I think I just showed the fire brigade the very simple thing, and there was a little instruction manual to the side, and it sort of explained that, because to the side there was a little instruction manual which related the numbers on the panel to the levels that the AOVs were on in the building, so the
Right.
floor levels.
Yeah, I see. And was the smoke extract system and the AOVs working during the tours that you did?
Yes.
And were the LFB provided with instructions as to the operation of that smoke extract system, to your knowledge?
To my knowledge, no.
Yeah. Now, if we can look at paragraph 118 of your witness statement on page 26. You say, at this point, I was involved in the end of defects, EOD inspection at the end of May 2017, about 2 weeks before the fire. It was arranged with Claire Williams and was booked for a full 2 days. On the 30th of May 2017, I walked round with Claire Williams, Tom Bishop, Rydon site agent, and on the 1st of June 2017, Gary Martin, site manager, joined us. Do you see that there?
Yes.
And then you tell us in 119 the reason for an EOD, end of defects inspection, is to revisit all of the building works at the end of the 12-month defect period to see if any work's defective and requires repairing, with the aim of creating one definitive list of defects. When all defects have been rectified, inspected and approved or signed off by the client's representative, then responsibility for any further issues is the client's. Do you see that there?
Yes, I do.
Now, then looking at paragraph 121 of your statement, you say in the first few lines there that it was during the walk round of the communal lobbies on the upper floors on the 1st of June 2017 that I noticed that the environmental function of the smoke extract system was not working. Do you see that there?
Yes.
When you realised that, did you think to yourself, well, if the environmental aspect of that system's not working, then there might be a problem with the smoke control aspect of that system?
Yes, I did think that.
And you also say that you went, this is in the next few lines, I checked the main control panel with Claire Williams present and noticed that it did not appear to be showing that any vents were open. Do you see that there?
Yes.
Now, is that the same HMI panel that you demonstrated to the fire brigade and others? Yeah. And had the HMI panel previously shown, if it was working, that the vents were open?
If the vents were open, it would show on the panel.
Yeah. So you could see that on this occasion. And you say that Claire Williams of the TMO told you that a company who was going to take over the maintenance of the smoke extract system had come to look at it 2 weeks previously and had set the system off.
Yes.
You see that there. What was Claire Williams's reaction to this discovery that the environmental system wasn't working and that none of the vents were showing as open on the panel?
What I remember is Claire was also shocked. So I don't think it was Claire who called them in. My understanding was KCTMO, as I said, go back a stage, end the defects. Once that building's handed over and we've proved we've done everything or all the outstanding defects which have occurred in the last year, then it is KCTMO's responsibility. KCTMO, from my understanding, were starting to line up contractors to carry on the maintenance and servicing of Grenfell.
Yeah.
So I think somebody jumped the gun trying to get them in. But I do remember Claire being sort of saying that she was shocked because it wasn't her who called them in.
Did she seem to understand the potential significance of the system not working in terms of the smoke control system?
I understand that Claire would be rightly worried. But also, just I it's come to light afterwards that it might not have been such a big thing anyway, because it was a really hot day when we done that walk around, and the environmental system also had a shut-off system on it, which if the air outside is hotter than the air inside, then it wouldn't work. It wouldn't basically bring in hotter air. The idea was to keep the lobby areas cooler. So if it was hotter outside than it was inside, it wouldn't bring the air in. And it was a really hot day that we done our walk, sort of the 2 days we did the walk around were hot days.
Right.
So
Did you have that thought at the time?
I didn't have that thought at the time. My worry at the time was that it didn't look to be working. I'd expect it, I don't know if it tried to explain, but it didn't work on every floor every time. So it
Hughes,
went through a rotation.
Sorry, do you want to just...
Sorry.
Can you just slow down a little
Yeah,
bit?
okay.
So I think we got to, you said it wasn't going to work on every floor at every time.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yes, okay. It worked on a rotation system. So it would do, if I remember, every 5 floors at a time. And then it would work for 15 minutes, then it would move up a rotation.
Yeah.
So, yeah, and like I said, it only worked, it also had a temperature sensor outside that if the air outside was hotter than the air inside, it wouldn't work, so all you'd be doing was bringing hotter air in, and that wasn't the purpose of the system. But I think also say that I wasn't sure, because in terms of me walking round, we were also that day going in and out of flats, looking at any defects inside the flats, that I might have happened to miss the rotation.
Did you explain to Miss Williams at this time the relationship between the environmental system and the smoke control system?
At the time, I don't think I did, but I would hope that Claire was aware of what we'd have done, because obviously we had done the work a year earlier and it was part of our specification.
Now, you go on in your statement to explain that you were sufficiently concerned that you reported the malfunction to JS Wright's aftercare department. That's right, isn't it? You phoned it through to JS Wright's aftercare team. Can you recall what was JS Wright's response when you did that?
Same as every time I phoned them up, but they would get it organised as quick as possible.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty certain they asked me to send it over an email, and I sent over an email and sent some photos.
Yes, we can see that. If we go to RYD 3094213 at page 64, there's an email you sent on the 1st of June to their aftercare department, where we can see you're saying, further to my emails about defects at Grenfell, the environmental mode on the AOV system is not working. I walked all 24 floors on Tuesday. It was not operating on any floor. Do you see that? And we can see from the attachments that you're sending photos. Do you know whether JS Wright followed up on the defect report?
I now know they didn't, but at the time I had no reason to suspect they wouldn't, because JSW had the best aftercare department that I've ever worked with.
Yeah.
In fact, there was a couple of times in the year previously I'd gone up there and phoned for a defect and somebody had arrived an hour later.
Did you ever check whether they had attended to the matter or somebody else had attended to the matter?
No, I didn't.
Did you ever contact Claire Williams again to emphasise the importance of this issue?
No, I didn't.
Did Claire Williams subsequently contact you about the system?
No, she didn't.
Now, we know that that was, I think, your last visit to Grenfell Tower, wasn't it?
Yes.
The 1st of June 2017. Can we turn to a document? This is RYD 3086541. Now, I think this was your weekly defect update report for Grenfell Tower. And I want to look, I know it's quite a small font here, but look at line 6 in the main text. There's a line that says AOV system not working properly that you can see in the description. Do you see that there?
Yes, I can.
And you've got service by JS Wright in the next column. It's created on the 1st of June 2017, and then you've got a target complete date of the 29th of June 2017. Do you see that there?
Yes.
Can you explain why that target complete date was 28 days after the defect had been logged?
No, this document is dealt with by our Rydon's aftercare department, and they're obviously given response times as per the contract. I don't understand why it was given a date, that thing. that long.
Did you not think that it needed to be dealt with more urgently than
I
28
never
days?
saw this document. And as I said, every other one I'd ever phoned through to JSW was dealt with very rapidly.
Okay. Final topic for my questions, Mr. Hughes. I just want to ask you about snagging of broken and drafty windows. To what extent were you made aware during your time on the project, or indeed after when you went back to Grenfell Tower, that there were complaints being made about gaps around the windows?
I did visit a couple of flats and felt a bit drafty in a few places.
So you agree that you did receive some complaints about drafty windows?
Yes. And I visited a couple of flats as well, say afterwards and during the works as well.
Can we just look at just two emails on this? So if we go HAR 30-17538. So this is someone called Emma Kelly of Rydon to you. Sorry, it's to be fair, it's to Ben Bailey and Ray Bailey, but copying you in. And she says, it's been noted that there's a large number of defects relating to windows open on our system, some of which have been open as long as August. This is not acceptable, and we're not receiving any response from our chaser emails calls. We must ensure that defects are closed out within the target rectification time provided. Do you see that there?
Yes, I do.
Were you concerned at this point about the quality of the window installation?
The quality of the window itself, no, I wasn't. But I asked Emma, I think, phoned me and said, sort of, can you possibly give Bailey's a sort of a chase, because we have got this outstanding thing. I said to copy me into it. I don't remember, I think, but I think asked Steve, because Steve had the better relationship with Harley's, to say they need to come and sort this out.
Right. Did any of the concerns that were raised about the quality of the window installation ever trigger in you a thought about whether the fire safety of those windows might be adequate?
No, they didn't.
Can we look at another document? This is a bit later. So that was January 2017. I want to look at May 2017. This is RYD 30-86363. And I want to look on page 2. There's an email from Lee Chapman to Ben Bailey dated the 14th of May. Yes, and we can see it's about flat 195. And we can see about 4 paragraphs down, it said, under the windowsill in the kitchen, I can get my fingers underneath, probably about a 10mm gap, then a 5mm gap up the side. In the living room, there are 3 windows, and again, there's talk of gaps around 3 to 4mm, which gets very drafty in windy weather. There's now a finishing stripe, and it's not sealed, etc. So we get a sense of that. And then there's various chasers about this. Were you made aware of this at the time, that there were complaints about drafts and gaps around windows?
I was aware of a couple of them, yes.
And again, the same question, were you not concerned about the quality of the installation of the windows upon being made aware of this kind of complaint?
It did raise some concerns with me, but I was concerned at the time that it was, so I keep using my hands to try and illustrate, but it was an issue with the support underneath, because none of the issues were ever around the sort of top and side. So I thought if there was gaps around there, we would also be getting reports of water coming in as well. And we never had one report of a leaky window at all. So what I had in my head, that there was an issue at the bottom with how the metal plate which held the windows up wasn't possibly properly sealed. Or I don't remember actually seeing how it was done on site, because I say a lot of the windows were in thing and insulation underneath them. I never saw actually how that was finished. So whether or not, I had in my mind that there was an issue with the ceiling behind that metal plate or the metal bracket the window sat on. Like I say, it was always at the bottom of the windows. It was never the top and the side. So it was never a waterproofing issue. Otherwise, we would have been getting reports of leaky windows as well.
Okay.
So that's, That's the thought process which went through my head at the time.
Yeah. Were you ever concerned that issues such as poorly installed windows might provide a route for fire spread around the windows?
No, I didn't have any concerns.
Did you ever investigate these issues personally?
I went into a couple of flats and I did feel the drafts, and my remedy was to mastic up the gaps from the inside. Because at that stage, I say, while we had the mast climbers up, nobody ever came to me with an issue. So the issues didn't start appearing until after the mast climbers had finished or had been dropped. So it was impossible to get back to the outside and see what my suspicions were very true. So I just dealt with the issue that there was at the time, which was the drafts, and sealed up all around the UPVC.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Hughes. Mr. Chairman, I've come to the end of my questions.
Good, thank you.
But we obviously need to take the customary break to see if there's any final questions.
Yes. Well, as you heard, Mr. Hughes, those are all the questions Miss Grange has for you, but we have to have a pause now just to make sure there aren't any further questions that might need to be put to you. So we're going to break now until 4:15. Will that be all right?
Yes, that should be fine.
Until
Yes.
4:15. And
Okay.
then you come back then, we'll see if there are any more questions.
Okay, thank you.
All right? If you'd like to go to the usher then, please. Thank you. Right, we'll say 4:15 then.
Thank you.
Yes, would you ask Mr. Hughes to come back in, please? Right, ready to carry on, Mr. Hughes?
Yes.
I think just a few more questions.
Okay.
Yes, Ms.
Yes,
Green.
thank you. Yes, just a few. Just going back to that 2nd of November 2015 building control visit. Do you remember
Yes.
we looked at that just before when we restarted last time? Can you remember whether Mr. Hoban actually went up the hoist and looked at any of the elevations at that point?
No, he didn't. First
didn't.
time I took him up the mast climbers was on that first one we discussed. So,
The 11th of November
yes, that's it.
2015. So not on the 2nd of November 2015?
No,
No, okay.
because
And
like I
then-
say, I hadn't agreed with him to take it up there, and it took an awful long time to go up there and come back down.
Yeah.
So it was something that I pre-booked with him, that he
Yeah.
would need to give us some time to do it.
I understand. And then just on fire risk assessment and fire risk assessors, did you generally have experience of fire risk assessors considering cladding or the external facade of a building?
No, I didn't, because that's probably the first time that I've really had interaction with a client's fire risk assessor.
Yeah, yeah. What was your understanding about why Mr. Stokes was asking about the cladding? Did he give
Well,
you any
it was
reason?
Part of the communal part of the building, or the outside of the building, so he was, well, I guess informing the client of their risks.
Yeah. And did he seem to you to have a particular interest in the cladding?
No, he didn't seem to. I always thought more interested on the inside of the building and how he interacted with residents.
Yeah. Mr. Chairman, those were all the
That's
follow-up
it.
questions I had. That's it.
Well, it was a few questions, Mr. Hughes, wasn't it? Thank you very much, Ms. Grange. Well, that's all the questions we have for you.
Okay.
Just remains for me to thank you very much for coming to give your evidence. It's been very helpful to hear you. And you're now free to go.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Ms. Grange. That's all for the day, I imagine.
Yes, tomorrow Mr. Millett will be taking Mr. Blake.
Good. And that will be at 10 o'clock.
That's correct. Yeah.
So 10 o'clock tomorrow then, please. Thank you.